Salvete, mihi nomen est, Stella, ad hoc est, Batgirl the Oracle, the Barbara Gordon podcast for, episode 222 for June MMXXII. Happy Pride Month. I will try to make this episode as queer as possible within reason, because there is one section that I will complain about in regards to queer baiting. So that's the only thing, but everything else, I'll try my best. Batgirl the Oracle is brought to you by MileHighComics.com, your new and collectible comic book store. Mile High Comics has an inventory of over 5 million comics from the gold, silver, bronze, and modern age, and over 100,000 trade paperbacks. If you're not into the vintage stock, Mile High Comics also has a subscription service called the New Issue Comics Express, offering a discounted price for comics ready to hit the shelves. So if you're looking for vintage back issues or a great modern subscription service, be sure to check out milehighcomics.com. Well, this episode is going to be pretty quick and dirty because I'm about to hit the tarmac and go to Germany and Austria, and I needed to get an episode out before then. So the front half with the vintage is going to be untouched, but the back half, there won't be a Nightwing. So for all of our Nightwing sexual identifiers, you will be without for Pride Month, which is a bit of a bummer, but hey, at least I got an episode out. I was thinking about, what sort of things I could talk about. Certainly this intro is not going to be as crazy and long as last time. I do want to talk about my first trip this summer, and I guess just latest trip to Busch Gardens, which is an amusement park in Williamsburg, Virginia. And there's also one in Tampa Bay. It has a sister in Tampa Bay, Florida. There was a new roller coaster due to come out this summer called Pantheon. And as a classicist, of course, I needed to go on this because, it's going to go through the Roman pantheon of gods. And as I would say mostly a roller coaster connoisseur within reason, there haven't been any that have been too intense. The most intense one, I would say, and the one that does check my mortality and give me pause and does make me nervous every time I go on, is called the Intimidator at King's Dominion. And that has a 300-foot drop at the very beginning. And the first time I went on, I was fine. Second time, I grayed out. And the third time, I blacked out. So I don't know if I'll ever go on that again. It's also the only roller coaster I've never been on in the front, with the exception of Pantheon, but I've just been on one. So anyways, Pantheon, it is a multi-launch coaster. It is now touted as the fastest multi-launch coaster in the world. I think its max is 73 miles per hour. And launching just means that it uses magnets to shoot you off acceleration wise. So there aren't any click, click, click. There aren't any of those. And so you're just kind of gliding along and then it'll shoot you off. And there's one point where it goes forward, almost up an arc. It goes up like quarter of an arc, and then it goes backwards, shoots you back, and then you go up to this point and you're just hanging there for a bit, and then you go down and it shoots you twice, and then you complete your arc. I'm not sure where the point is of your fast acceleration. It could be that point to get you over that, but it was crazy. But let me back up and just say there's a lot of stuff I could say about that trip to Busch Gardens. I went with Ellie, Claire, and Claire's brother, Will. I don't know if I've spoken of him before. So all former students, but I could say probably we're all friends now. And Will just graduated high school. So congrats to him, going to UVA, Wahoo Wah. So Ellie is not going to go on this roller coaster. She has some motion sickness issues, and there are some coasters she can't do. And it's the backwards part that's going to mess her up, as well as the corkscrew. So she's not going to do it. Claire and Will are going to go with me. They're a bit, they're a bit nervous about it, but they're going to do it for me because this is just the one thing that I really want to do this time, is to go on this coaster. So as we're going in, this guy comes out and I say, hey, how was it? What would you say it's like? And he says, it's like Tempesto Part 2. Now, Tempesto is a fine roller coaster, but it's honestly not my favorite. And that one could make me sick because it has kind of this cradling rock back and forth. It goes back and forth a couple times. It's not just once. So I thought, well, that's not a great endorsement, but we'll keep on going. So now we get to this part, and I don't know what they're called exactly, but they're guidelines. That's not even it. I really have no idea what the terminology would be, but it's basically these metal stands with a limit marker up top. And there's one that's short that says you have to be this tall to get in. But there's now one that's tall that says you cannot be this height to ride. And I've never seen one of those before. So Will, luckily, is just shy. I think it was saying 6'4", he's 6'1". But this is something like, what's happening? This is super weird. And of course, we're like holding up a short line behind us as we're like all discussing this. We keep on walking. We're not even really to the line now. We're just making it around. I should say that because we went on June 1st, it was a Wednesday. Most of the schools aren't out. We were just walking on our rides, which is great. So we're just walking. They have nice little points or markers that talk about the gods and, what the gods are and what you will encounter. And then there's even a cool map of the coaster in plan form. And you see what sections are for what gods. Before we even get to that, now there's a warning right before we turn the corner. There's a warning that says you need to have 2 fully functioning hands and you cannot have an amputation on a leg above the knee. I personally have never seen this sign. My 2 comrades were already nervous and they're even more nervous. I'm getting nervous because I've not seen this. So now we go. Now I do love the front row, but it's the first time. Also, my comrades, well, I guess it wouldn't have mattered, but the front row is there's a line. So we just go in and we're going to be like second and third car or something like that. There's going to be a couple in front of us. Chat them up. Have you been here before? And they're like, no, but you'll be fine. I asked some of the people that are in line for front row, has anyone been on this ride? No one's been on this ride, but this one child. And this child said, now she's probably like 10, but I'm like, okay, tell me all about it. And she's like, why don't you let it be a surprise? And I thought, ma'am, that is not what I asked. But her mother said that, who hadn't been on, she said, all I've heard is that keep your neck back. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess that's good advice because this kid's not helping me out. Plus, children are fearless. So really, can you trust them? So we're going to be, let's say, the next the next coaster. And people that were chatting up, they're in there. Now there's some sort of holdup. So there's this guy, I guess maybe there's no like big boy seat because on some coasters they have big boy seats. So if you are bigger, you can still get latched in. They move him to another row. And one of the people that are working is like trying to shove him in there, like trying to click the seat down. It's not working. So he's taken off. And then this couple who seem to be latched in are also taken off. I'm not really sure what happened there. I don't know if it's a weight issue. I mean, with him, I think it certainly was a size issue, but I wasn't sure if like overall it would have been unbalanced with what they were doing. So now they're off because I thought, oh, we'll see. They were even giving thumbs up and we're saying like, tell us what happens afterwards. So now we have no one to guide us. So now we're going in. We're going into to the coaster. I don't think we went on that one, but it was the next one. We went in. I was getting scared. My heart was beating. It was pumping fast. I gave some fist bumps to Claire and Will. And then we started off and just coast down the little coast. And then we zoom off. And it was amazing. I think Verbolten had been my favorite, which is also multi-point launch, and it's mostly indoors. It's in Germany, so it takes place in the dark forest and it's inside. It's pretty cool. And if you can ever go on it at night, that's even more awesome because you leave the darkness of the inside and you're still in the dark outside. And this one may have been. And next time I go, because I definitely will probably go again. I think Josh is going to come up and we're going to go. I want to go in the front row because I think that would be amazing. But yeah, it was just so fun, so fast. There's this moment where you're upside down moving laterally because normally, you do a corkscrew and you're just constantly in motion, but like corkscrews halfway, you're upside down moving and then it corkscrews the rest of the way. And that section where you go up and you go back and there's just that moment, at the peak where you're like, oh my gosh, and it just stops and you're weightless and you're flying. And then after when you hit those two launches and you're thinking, oh my gosh, am I about to go off of this? It just reminds me of some of the deaths that I've had playing Roller Coaster Tycoon because of accidents where coasters have gone off the tracks. But yeah, it was awesome. I can't wait to do it again. But you certainly are trusting physics, you're trusting man-made things to do this. So that was super cool. And I am ever so grateful to Claire and Will. And they said they also really loved it. But Claire kept her eyes closed the entire time, which was funny because she was saying, I had no idea where my body was at any point in time. I thought, wow, that was true of what I felt too. It was just crazy what was going on. But then she said my eyes were closed. And I thought, well, no wonder you didn't know where you were. So highly recommend. And yeah, if you ever go to Williamsburg, just hit me up. I'll meet you over there and go on some of those coasters. I don't like drop towers. I don't like spinny things either, but the coasters I will definitely ride with you. And Carolyn Coca, our professor, our chief Tata correspondent, came and visited. She was going to go to AwesomeCon in DC, and she swung down and came and visited me. And per usual, this visit could be considered NC-17 with all the details that I could say about it and the things that you said, the bullying from her that went on to me. No, it was a lot of fun. And she did strangle me at one point, but I'm glad to say that I am alive and well. And many people, once I showed that strangling image to them, thought that I deserved it and it was karma. Even my mother said karma, I guess because I strangle other people. So that was a lot of fun. And it's always sad when you have a friend come to visit you and then you spend like a whole day together and have good conversations and go fun places and then they leave. It's kind of like this emptiness. So it was sad when she drove away. I was like, well, now back to my old same humdrum life. Oh boy. And I think that was the only thing I was going to talk about. Of course, I can't really talk about Germany and Austria yet. I will say, however, that I do know a couple places now where we're going, but I'm just kind of along for the ride. It's definitely my father's trip. He wanted me to go with him. And then it's two of his friends, one of them from high school, and he was in a band with him. And it's lovely that I don't have to worry about details and things like that. So I'm just along for the ride. Every place, every destination will be a surprise for me. Okay, let me move on to Find Your Joy, aka Shag's Mac and Cheese of Comfort and Joy. And what's been giving me joy in these times? Times are up and down per usual, but we can make it. I feel summer is my deadline for myself to get out of this work situation. So here's hoping, fingers crossed. But I will say, starting with the queerness that I promised you, NCIS Hawaii has been giving me joy. That's going to be my joy that I'm mentioning. So you guys know, I like shippers, period. And I also like to find shipper videos, usually music videos on YouTube. And one of these ships popped up and I thought, oh, what's this? Investigating. And it's coming from NCIS Hawaii. So NCIS Hawaii first season is done. How can I watch this? Oh, it's only on Paramount Plus. So I ended up getting a free trial of Paramount Plus just so I could watch NCIS Hawaii, so I could see the Lucy and Kate ship happen, which was nice. Then it was very painful, for a very long time. And then it was nice again. So, but it turned out, I mean, I really like Lucy and Kate. Ernie is really fun. And the boss is the first special agent in charge as a woman, which is really cool. So I ended up actually really liking the whole cast of characters and really liking the show. So it wasn't like I was just watching it for the ship, because in the beginning it was certainly like, I'm just watching this for the ship. But then it's like, oh, I actually really enjoy these people and this is super fun. And I'm happy there's a woman in charge and that kind of thing. So I recommend it if you're interested, I guess, in military things. I know that's not everybody's thing. There was something funny. I think I was looking up people because someone looked familiar. Captain Milius looked familiar. He played Captain Carter's romantic interest on Agent Carter. I don't know why I called her Captain Carter, probably because of Doctor Strange too. But he was also in Dollhouse, and I was trying what I was trying to remember. But I remember seeing an IMDb rating and basically somebody saying, giving a really low rating and saying like the lesbians are taking over, where's the military, dot 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 dot. And I thought, well, that certainly is what someone would probably say if they're used to a certain status quo on their NCIS episodes or shows or whatever. So I think, yeah, again, recommend NCIS Hawaii. Okay, no quickies this time. There is a batch of Nightwing that I need to do, but I felt like I didn't really need to do it yet because she's not even in Babs is not even in a couple of them, and there's like enough Babs dick going on and what I'm about to do. So I'm going to do 3 Birds of Prey issues, the last 3 before Gail Simone, and I never thought I'd say it, but really I cannot wait for Gail Simone's run to begin. And a big reason, honestly, is because of this arc here. Really, these 2 arcs that we have with Hernandez, it just was not my speed. Let's just say that. Okay, so we're doing 53, 54, and 55. First is Birds of Prey 53, Girls Night Out, May 2003 cover date. Writer Gilbert Hernandez. And remember, I said I've never heard of this person. Carolyn actually texted me and said, just so you know, he's one of the brothers that writes Love and Rockets. And that's something I'd never read. So that's why I didn't know. But there you go. Shout out to the people who like Love and Rockets. And I apologize for not knowing that detail. Artist Casey Jones. He's back from beating up the shredder. Colorist Hi-Fi. That's it. Okay. Dinah and Barbara take a much needed vacation and reflect on their most recent adventures. Barbara just wants to spend time on her laptop. That's not a vacation. But Dinah spends her time with a man she met at the bar, Tom. Back in Gotham, Tom, Dinah, and Barbara go out together. As they leave the club, they are jumped in an alley where Tom is amazed at the other two's combat skills, in particular Babs. Dinah is conflicted about her friendship with Tom now that Oliver is back in her life. Barbara is having her own conflicted feelings about Dick, who has left several unanswered messages. Back in his apartment, Tom answers the phone and addresses the caller as Danko, his brother. Okay, so looking at this, remember that I don't have digital copies of Birds of Prey, so you'll just be seeing me look down a lot. But here we have the cover. And it's interesting because of the rips on this, you would expect there to be like a third person. And I guess the only third person we would know would probably be Babs. But there is no third person here. It's just Dinah and this guy. We'll assume it's Tom. Of course, it is Phil Noto, but you kind of wonder, yeah, why is it torn? It says Getaway Paradise and then Gotham Airlines. Okay. So I am glad that someone is asking the same questions that I was about the fake killer moth in the previous Hernandez arc. If you remember just who he was, how he got in there, all that. Dinah's asking those sorts of questions. Dinah's also, besides asking questions on that, questioning herself, which is a bit bizarre. So it says, not for the first time, she wonders how she fits in this universe of superpower beings. Even with her canary cry and skill at martial arts, she sometimes feels terribly outclassed. I think, and it was a running theme for the previous arc for Hernandez, that he seems to be treating this cast of characters as if we're meeting them for the first time. But because it's issue 53, we certainly haven't been. But this is a Dinah questioning herself way back in issue 1, which makes sense. Or, a Power Girl questioning herself after she lost her powers, not now. So don't really get that, but maybe new reader friendly. I don't know. We're doing, of course, this insight into the mind of the characters thing again. Um, just like I said, like we're getting to know them, but Babs does at least ask herself why she didn't feel a bit more after Killer Moth killed himself. And if you remember, I myself also wondered why she was not emotionless, but she certainly wasn't emoting as much as I would have if someone had killed himself right before my eyes. Dinah, I feel like, is acting a bit strange. Let's see here. At one point, she says, "That's the idea. There's a cute butt." And then Bab says, "Where?" And then Dinah says, "In the mirror." Okay. Babs wants to go up to the room. And then Dinah is saying, "Not unless somebody will be joining you." And Babs says, "What has gotten into you this trip? Don't answer that. I predict a Sex in the City type response." And yeah, Dinah goes on and is just being, if you get this reference, I know we're on a DC Comics podcast, but I do it all the time. If you get this reference, it is Mary Jane. She's being a total Mary Jane, just partying it off. So clearly something is the matter, but it's just like it's a bit too much. And you're only seeing her being a bit too much and not so much like, oh, what is it? But even Babs can kind of intuit, oh, it's probably because Ollie's back and she's wrestling with these feelings and everything. But good heavens, shouldn't Dinah know that Babs and Dick are together? Why is she trying to get Babs to hook up with some rando here at this party? There is a funny section where this guy pops up and says, "Can I do something for you, Red?" And she says, "Lay off the blonde in there with the perfect curves. You'll live longer," which is right there. So, I mean, she still got it. Oh, just you wait actually until this other person. There was a section where she actually, yeah. So 4 days later, apparently, Babs is called Grandma by Dinah, saying, "Don't wait up, Grandma." Dick has been attempting to message her and she's been pushing off. And we know in some of those quickies that I've done that they're having a bit of a tough time. Babs is struggling to understand his double roles. And then, of course, Tarantula and all of that. "I'll return calls when I'm back home," is what she says in her mind. And then the narration bubble, it says, "Unlike Canary, Oracle has conflicted feelings about her relationship with the original Robin," which I don't really, that makes no sense because Canary, I think, also has conflicted feelings about Ollie. And then it continues on. "Maybe Dinah's got the right idea about not rushing into things. Maybe playing the field can work the kinks. Maybe it's time, work out the kinks. Maybe it's time to keep Dick guessing again. Maybe staying in is the wrong thing to do after all." Who is this Barbara Gordon? She is in a relationship with him. There may be a bit of a rough spot that they're currently in, but now's not the time to go out and play the field. And that's not just playing the field. You're actively cheating on somebody, because I think there is an understanding with you and Dick. If she went out and slept with someone here on this vacation, can't just leave it there. She would have to tell Dick, and Dick would absolutely be heartbroken and break up with her. Okay. There is this romantic section here between Tom and Dinah. I do wonder who kissed whom. But this guy, it's kind of weird, especially because I thought, oh, well, something will be answered. There's probably something more about Tom. There's actually really not more about Tom. But he actually leaps to the fact that she has a husband. So because she rips her lips away and said, "I like you," but, he says, "You've got a husband." And she says, "No," but, it is very complicated. And then he can psychoanalyze her. Your estranged lover's back in your life and you're afraid to let go of all your feelings again because there's no guarantee he'll stay. And she wonders how. And I too wonder how. And with hindsight, I can tell you I still wonder how. But as I was reading, I thought, oh wow, he knows something. He's been spying on them. That is not what happened. So I have no idea. I guess just good guesses on Tom's. He's an insightful gentleman, which doesn't happen very often. But I think that's a very on the nose hypothesis for somebody that just met you 4 days ago. There are a bunch of jerks on this vacation. There's one guy here that talks to Babs. I think she's in a movie theater that he dated someone with one leg, but she didn't need a wheelchair to get around. And he's sensitive to the needs of a handicapped woman, loneliness, their repressed sexual desires. And then she gets real upset and speeds away. There's even some dust. She says, or he says, you're all the same, able to walk or not. So I'm telling you, do not go wherever these ladies went for sure. And then she comes home and there's a very sad sight with Dinah sleeping on the bed with an image of Ollie right there. Once they get back home, I am glad that they work on the security. I think that was pretty important. Perhaps they should have done that. Well, Bab should have done that before they left for vacation. It's obviously Killer Moth got in somehow, so let's fix that. But I feel like you would need to bring in a bunch of different people to test it, right? Because Dinah's abilities or ways of getting into a secure area is going to be different from somebody like Catwoman. And yeah, so I'm just shocked that Dinah doesn't bring in other bat people to test it out and be sure, like, yes, 100%, this is not a porous area. I would say, because there are more dates, I would say that Dinah seems to be giving Tom the wrong idea. But then, in this case, she takes Babs with her on the date. And so it kind of all works out. It's very old fashioned chaperone and is awkward in the beginning, but it turns out like he has a crush on Babs now. I, tried to do this with Ellie actually, but she refuses. Now, I don't literally need her on the date. I don't need to be on her date, but I've often asked, can you tell me where you're going to be with this guy, and then I can show up and be at like an adjacent table and just kind of voyeur. She's not having it. She said that she would be laughing the entire time and that it would give it away. So I don't know whose fault that is, but maybe if she could keep a straight face, then it would be a fun little situation. I'll keep trying. Every time I hear she's going out, I try to wiggle myself in there. But anyways, a quick shift for Tom. He was obsessing over Dinah. Now he is all of a sudden smitten with Barbara, calls Dinah, checks in on Barbara, which is pretty cool. That reminds me of a movie. It's Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire, where after the Thanksgiving Day parade, I think it was, or whatever parade that was, Harry is calling Mary Jane, and Mary Jane is like really talking up Spider-Man and everything. He's like, what do you mean marvelous? Yeah, so it kind of reminds me of that. At the very end, which I'll talk about this whole arc, of course, but at the very end, we do have a fight between, golly, I just saw an image of Babs, a fight between Dinah and Babs, and it starts to ramp up if you can see how angry we're getting here. And then, of course, she ignores the message, but it's, oh my. So the main point, I guess, of contention is about Dick and why haven't you messaged him back? This isn't like you. She's not doing it because she wants him to appreciate her more and not take her for granted. Dinah doesn't like this. Dinah wonders why Babs is playing games. And then Babs is like, what are you talking about? What about Tom? Don't patronize me. Comes up from Dinah to Barbara. And then Dinah says, if you want my sloppy second so bad, have him, makes no difference to me. And then Babs yells, "Oh, Dinah, stop it. You're acting like a spoiled, jealous teenage brat." And Dinah walks off. Babs gets another message from Nightwing. She previously had said she'd click on it if he messages her again. And then, sorry, I just saw this weird ad. Look at this weird ad. I don't know what it is, but I was a bit scandalized for a moment. And she ends up ignoring the message. So I don't know what is going on with the fight. I think it's most likely the fact that these two women, actually that whole fight fails the Bechdel test because they're talking about men, talking about two different men. But they're having their own issues. Dinah's having her issues regarding Ollie, and obviously Tom is there and probably shouldn't be. So Babs is calling her out on that. And then Babs is having her issues with Dick, and now Tom is involved in that. So it's a weird hexagon. I don't know. And it comes out like their struggles come out against each other. But I felt like it was I don't know. I felt like it was a bit too much. Let's not have these ladies fight. The whole vacation was a bit of a drag anyways, where they just were, I guess Babs was acting as she normally would as a recluse, and then Dinah was just like over Dinah-ine. She was definitely a Mary Jane in that situation. So they weren't really bonding. Like that could have been a really cool vacation with them hanging out with each other, but instead we failed the Bechdel test and we had to have some men involved, which was, I don't know, but it just seems unbelievable that Babs hasn't let Dinah in on what's going on with Dick because they're best friends. And so I think that Dinah should know about Tarantula, about all that stuff that's going on. So having Dinah question Babs, like, why are you doing this? She should know because Babs should have told her. But I think Dinah's absolutely right that Babs, it's not her playing games and why is she doing that? So I don't know. I'm going to give this 7 out of 10 guys who think women with or without legs are all the same. My question is, what did we learn from this particular issue? Which I'll ask at the very end of this arc. What changed from this story from the very beginning? So we shall see. But I guess, we mostly learned the relationship hangups of our girls, and not even explicitly. I think you need to know these characters more, which is a bit of a fault and a contradiction, because if Hernandez is, to a certain extent, as I see him doing, writing this as if first time readers are coming on, because he is giving us a lot of insight into who these women are solo, he is failing to do that in terms of who these romantic interests are and why these women might be struggling. So he should have gone the whole way. But again, I think it really fails. And honestly, 7 might be generous, but it fails to do the relationship of these women justice, because they wanted a vacation. That should have been like, how could these ladies hang out together and bond more and be best friends? I don't know. That's crazy. Okay, so I'm going to move on to Birds of Prey 54, Gotham Magic, June 2003. Writer Gilbert Hernandez, penciler Casey Jones, inkers John Beatty and Jose Marzan Jr., and colorist Hi-Fi. While out in the streets of Gotham, Black Canary runs into Nightwing in the middle of a fight and assists him. Nightwing asks her about Barbara, who has been avoiding his calls, and Dinah tenses up, thinking about her own falling out with her friend. Dick takes the initiative and confronts Barbara himself to ask why she's been avoiding him. Meanwhile, Tom connects with his brother Danko, who has been suffering from blackouts and memory loss, forgetting weeks of his life at a time. Later, as he is watching a TV program about the Justice League of America, Danko starts to remember his past as an apprentice to Felix Faust. He also remembers his vendetta against Barbara at Tom's mentioning of her. As Dinah runs into Metamorpho, who wants to thank her for her help with his family way back in Birds of Prey 52, she starts thinking about her own family, including Barbara and Oliver. She heads back to their base to find Felix Faust waiting. Or so they say. Whoops, wrong one. And I noticed as I was going to my long box to pull out that I have a couple doubles of 53 and 54. I think might have been one of those situations where it was on my Dick and Babs list, but that was I was lied to. And you're kind of lied to here, right? This cover, which is pretty cool. Again, a Phil Noto. Yep. But it seems like, oh, Dinah and Metamorpho and Dick, they're all going to go into action, but that's not necessarily what happens. Okay. So I do like the beginning where Dinah runs into Nightwing and then Nightwing asks about Dinah. Dinah contemplates what's going on because this has happened at least once before, right? Where was that Birds of Prey 8? Where Nightwing and Dinah have this person in common and so they can talk about her. And of course, they're coming from different vantage points of it and their relationships are different, but they've had that discussion before. And in 8, I think it was not 100% clear like who this person was, though you could kind of intuit, oh, it's Barbara. But this time, like everything's out in the open. So it is interesting to have them talk it out. But yeah, I almost wish it would have been more intimate. But when you're talking with a third party and it's not someone that is in that relationship, right? So if Dinah is talking about Babs to someone who is not Babs, you don't want to go too into details. She does say she's got a lot on her mind, I guess. Almost bit my head off the other day. Of course, I'm not totally blameless. So at least she's talking about kind of the stressors that's going on and encourages him to keep bugging her. I felt like this section was really weird where Dick and Babs actually have a conversation. Babs is treating the conversation with Dick so lightly, and he's being sorry. He's talking about how important these things are. It starts off funny because, of course, like I said, needed to test that security system, so he's gotten all trussed up there. But he apologizes, explains, and he asks, is there someone else? And she says, right boy wonder, like I have the energy. But I don't know, like he's being, I think, very genuine. And she's, I guess, if I could use the words from the previous issue, just, yeah, playing games here, I think. She then practically cheats on him in an Ethan Frome sort of way by by going out on a date with Tom, and even Tom gives her a cheek kiss. I mean, what am I reading here? Like I said, some Ethan Frome business where she might not be romantically dating Tom, but it's certainly a break from Dick. And I think Dick was lurking in the corner. Can you see it here? The page flipped. Yeah, there's Dick lurking in the corner. I don't know. It is like a emotional affair or a break or something like that. But then she goes home. And she's actually with Dick. He does not ask about what he has seen. She does not fess up, but it does, maybe that's all she needed was some time alone with Tom to realize that Dick Grayson is the one for her. I don't know. I think probably more personal work needs to be done to figure out what's going on here, but I am a bit nervous about this particular relationship. There is tension between Dinah and Babs now, which is, I think, unnecessary. You're getting it mostly over the headset, which is nostalgic, of course. But yeah, Babs kind of waves a white flag and asks if you want to get some coffee. And Dinah's busy, but says, she'll take a rain check. So hopefully we get back to a good relationship there. Oh boy. Okay. Well, it's Danko Twag. So he's not dead. We kind of discover what he actually did in that stasis field that Babs had entrapped there. But we also get the past that nobody really asked for, but I guess it is good to understand his humble origins as a sweeper for Felix Faust and kind of stealing his mystic arts and the knowledge that goes with that and all of that. It seems like this arc is about straining Our Lady's emotions and relationships, but for what purpose? I think we're pushing them to answer questions that we know the answers to already about who is important to them and why. And I think they know those as well. So it's just a bunch of over dramatic, unnecessary dramatic nonsense is what I'm going to say. I still think I'm going to give this higher than it deserves, but I will give it 7 out of 10 trussed up dicks. Okay. And now we're moving on to our last issue, which is Birds of Prey 55, Heroes and Heroes. July 2003 is the cover date. Writer Gilbert Hernandez, penciler Casey Jones, and inkers John Beatty and Jose Marzan Jr. and colors Hi-Fi. After his break-in to the clock tower, Black Canary and Oracle realize they need help stopping Danko Twag, who has the teleportation powers of Felix Faust. Dinah calls Metamorpho, who is in the middle of a battle himself. She doesn't get a chance to call anyone else, however, as Danko returns, this time with his brother Tom in tow. Barbara attends to Tom while Dinah and Danko teleport away and continue the fight. Dinah learns more about her opponent and his desire to prove himself as talented and successful as his brother. Danko teleports one last time to the park where Tom and Barbara are regrouping. Unfortunately, it's one time too many. Faust had warned him that teleporting too many times would be dangerous way back in Birds of Prey 54, which was the previous issue, and his warning came true. Danko dies in his brother's arms, muttering about Batgirl. Metamorpho shows up and Dinah takes him dancing, and while Barbara calls up Dick to schedule a rendezvous. What? Metamorpho shows up and Dinah takes him dancing while Barbara calls up Dick to rendezvous some romantic. Oh my gosh. One more time. Metamorpho shows up and Dinah takes him dancing while Barbara calls up Dick to schedule a rendezvous of her own. Okay. Last one. And then we're over. We're done with this. So Human Target guest stars. No, I'm just kidding. So Babs, I guess this passes. This is the Carolyn. It passes. Carolyn knows. I think, well, because you can see, man, I don't know. Maybe that's an 80% pass because you don't see her legs too much, but you do see the wheelchair at least, but you see all the people's here. But there you go. I guess Tom again, for whatever reason. Okay. Well, Danko is obsessed. He is obsessed with Babs and knows where to get to her, but doesn't actually know what she looks like. That does not make a lot of sense to me. Even after tying her up for a whole issue when we did the previous arc, doesn't know what she looks like. That is a bit bizarre. Now, one could argue it's because of his blacking out issues and losing some time. But honestly, if he remembers Barbara, then and freaks out when he hears her name and Batgirl and all of that, there's some, yeah, he should. So this, I think, doesn't really make sense writing wise. Not sure what's going on. I do like the intro fight between Danko and, I mean, Danko is dressed up like Felix Faust, so that's why the previous synopsis ended like it did. But it is a pretty cool fight. Apparently, Danko has to bite his wrist in order to teleport, which is gross. He's just like bleeding out each time he teleports. Babs is playing a bit of a mind game with Tom, and I'm assuming at one point she douses him right there, but I'm assuming it's to protect I'd say her, but also their secret, because she is, whenever we get there, um, yeah, he wakes up in a park. I guess she rolled him all the way there with him in her lap. I don't know. And, says, "Oh, I found you here." So I'm guessing that it's because she wants to protect her secret as well as Dinah's. And later on, when Dinah appears, she hides in a tree. So Tom doesn't see her. So I'm guessing that that's what's going on. Suddenly, I mean, maybe it's not so sudden, but let's just say this issue really gets nutty. I don't even think that I can properly comment on it. But just Tom, he is so out of it. He's so distressed that Babs just goes with whatever he is saying. Let me see where this is. Barbara, why did he call out your name? I mean, he was going absolutely nuts when he shouted out your name. Oh God, and then she says, "Oh, well, okay, he and I had met before. Oh God, you two dated." And then she says, well, I wouldn't call it that, but I could see even then that he had serious emotional problems. What are you talking about? How are you leaping to this? Like, it's a very weird conversation. Um, and then he said, "And that's why you didn't want to get close to me." Okay, but none of this explains his coming and going covered in smoke. No, a lot of this doesn't make sense to any of us, Tom. Dinah is hiding in a tree, like I said before, and Danko makes a comment about never meeting his brother's dates. And at this point, when Barbara is mentioned, he doesn't fly into a frenzy, which is bizarre, but actually begins apologizing and even apologizes to Batgirl. And then Tom, after Danko dies, is adamant that he has to go find Batgirl. She said, "Batgirl, Batgirl, I have to find Batgirl for him." And then Barbara says, "You can't, Tom. She doesn't exist." And then, as a thought bubble, says, "Not anymore," which is pretty interesting. Ooh. We find out that Tom leaves Gotham, goes back to wherever he needs to go. He left town without a word. Yeah, I don't, where did he go? Why would he leave so hastily? I guess the easier answer is that trauma, right? Trauma makes us do things that from the outside of that trauma you don't really understand. And this was to have someone and a close friend, a brother die in your arms is pretty traumatic, as well as whatever was going on, him being gassed up and then kind of kidnapped to a non-secure location in a park. I guess he just wanted to get out of there, but it seemed like he had an emotional connection with both Dinah and Babs. So I am surprised that he didn't seek them out one last time and kind of go through what had happened. I don't know if Tom reappears, but I hope he's doing okay. Well, at the very end, we have it could have been, right? Is this just two panels? Ridiculous. We have two panels of a Bechdel, I think. No, nope, sorry, of a Bechdel failing section between the two of the ladies. Now, I kind of just wanted this for this arc, right? Of these two women together, hanging out, having a vacation. But instead, this is where I said that to a degree, right? It would be all about the pride this episode, but here we have some queer baiting here. You know how I do not like the queer baiting between Babs and Dinah. So let's see here. Dinah says, because in regards to Tom just leaving, right? Dinah says, "You don't think Tom suspects anything about us?" And then Babs says, "You make it sound like we're an item. Maybe we better get going before somebody else thinks the same." So, I just don't like that. But anyways, I will say the writer gets an F just for leaning into that queer baiting of Dinah and Babs. I just want them to be friends. I think that women can also be friends without them having to be shipped together. And I do realize that I am also a hypocrite because Kara and oh my gosh, what is her name? Oh no. Luther? Not Lana Luther. Heck, how have I forgotten? Anyways, that ship because it's like Luther Corp, isn't it? Or Car Corp? I can't remember what that ship is. Even though they're friends, there's something about that that just feels like there's some romance brewing there. But anyways, I just don't like these two women doing that. And I think that goes way back when to that one particular image. Who knows what Gail Simone will do in the case of this. Hopefully there are some queer characters coming into the Birds of Prey. I know that the actual cast of characters starts to expand, so that would be nice. I don't know what the point was of having Metamorpho. He shows up right here. He appears very briefly in the previous issue, just on a phone call. So I guess maybe that was his point. He appears in that issue, so he can appear in this issue. But here it's just to take Dinah dancing. I mean, what? And, would Sapphire like this? I don't think so. But, my morals and ethics when it comes to relationships are different from other people. So perhaps it's okay. Okay. Babs, Dinah, they're back together. Babs, Dick, they're back together. But what did this arc do? So that's my question for these 3 issues. Aren't we back where we started, except that we know that our beloved Killer Moth is not the Killer Moth, which I feel like I just want to erase these 6 issues from continuity so that the Killer Moth is the Killer Moth. But honestly, yeah, everything is back to the status quo as if nothing had happened in this particular story. And I think the purpose of stories, or at least comics, is that it is pushing something forward. So to have it actually be a literal ring, and not a ring composition, because that just is recalling the end, but the beginning and the end to basically be the same, I don't think that's very good. So I'm going to give this, I made it lower. Still, I think I'm being pretty generous. 6.5 out of 10 bitten wrists. And as I said again, or as I said before, I'll say one more time, that I am looking forward to the Gail Simone run, because this was not up to snuff. So there's some pressure on Gail Simone, I have to say, and mainly coming from the outside world where people are telling me how good it is, but now there's there's already some internal pressure because I want it to be as good as Chuck Dixon, which is kind of my favorite run. So, okay. I do have some listener emails. Okay, so I do have a couple comments from the previous episode YouTube video. So first of all, Donovan said, Alfred can't be triple fired because Batman said he was on his way to give backup. He can't fire him for following orders. And I said, are you sure Alfred was the backup? And Donovan replied, yeah, Batman said help is on the way and Alfred arrived. Who else? Plus, he wasn't mad at him for appearing, just for keeping him out of Dick's room. So I do appreciate this. And Donovan has now become, I have chief Tata correspondent, chief hairstyle correspondent. Now I have my chief jerk whisperer and hypocrite apologist, and that is Donovan Morgan Grant. So your congratulations on that particular title. So if Alfred can't be triple fired, then perhaps it's really Batman who should be triple fired, because he has a child going into battle, he has a woman going into battle, and he's got an old man going into battle. So probably Batman should be fired and just kicked out of Gotham by somebody. Hornacek gave me the thumbs up that I now know about the green ring around when I'm sharing, so I know what's up. And now I'll go into my actual emails. So one of them was a YouTube comment, but he wrote in as well. So I will read this from Adam Rogers, specifically 221 part 1. It's been years since I've been able to follow the podcast, but although I have not had the time to follow the comics since I started my new job, I've had time to follow the podcast again. I also left the following comment on the YouTube video, but I thought I'd share it here as well. Winky faced emoji. Yes, it is pretty weird to objectify animals. In fact, you have no problem objectifying men like Nightwing, but being highly disturbed by a woman like Cass, which is perfectly normal on its own, of course, a winky face and the thumbs up, is actually a double standard. As for the issue, I'd say it was just poor writing all around. While Batman is often acted like a major jerk in comics history, I don't agree with that portrayal. I prefer his depiction in BTAS. Sure, he could be a bit of a jerk at times, but in the end, it was always clear that he cared about his friends, family, team members. And Barbara was just, wow, I don't see her acting like that at all. That was just terrible, even more out of character than Batman, in my opinion. And then he got those eyes. Longtime fan Adam Rogers. P.S. I don't really ask for directions much either, at least not from people. I rely on Google, LOL, a winky face emoji, and then one of those nervous sweat emojis. So let me first say thank you for writing. Thank you for listening in again. Now, the objectification of the animals. I guess I'm just going to keep doing it. I will say that there was a moment I was showing Carolyn around my alma mater's grounds, and there were two dogs, and I said, okay, are we going to objectify? She did. She turned her head and we looked, and we decided not as fuzzy as the corgi. So I'm going to keep doing it. I don't think anyone is being harmed in the process. I'm not shouting or hooting or hollering around them. And as for objectifying men like Nightwing, which, ooh la la, of course I'm going to do that. But being all about being really angered at the objectification of Cass. Now, you call that a double standard, but can you double standard the double standard? Because the double standard already is that women are constantly objectified, but men are not. So now if I'm reversing that, I think I'm negating it and maybe helping society out. And I was talking to Carolyn about this particular comment, and she had something great to say, and I wish I was recording. But basically, with Dick, I'm just admiring the male form and appreciating it. But when women are objectified, their value is being taken for granted, basically, and it can also lead into dangerous situations, and they're more commodified and treated like an actual object than anything else. But with Dick, I still appreciate him as a person. So I'm double standarding the double standard, and I think that negates. So there you go. Now my next and final is from my former BFF, Shayna, and you'll find out why she's my former. I'm not going to play act. I read this and I audibly gasped, as I sometimes do for those people who know me. So she writes, BFF Stella, I have a confession to make. I was one of the people who trolled you on your Twitter poll. I couldn't help myself. I'm not even reading Nightwing, and I didn't have any context for the question you were asking. It was just too tempting. If you want to revoke my BFF status, I understand, though perhaps you are already considering it when I praised Gail Simone's Batgirl in my last email, winky-faced emoticon. Well, you're right. You are in timeout for this episode, Shayna, and then the next episode, I will allow you back into the BFF status. She continues, since finishing number 6 of Batgirls, I've gone back and reread the entire arc while ignoring every narration box. There was a lot I forgot about and some interesting stuff that I hope we'll see revisited moving forward. A lot of things felt rushed to me in this arc, and I wish a little more attention was given to the interpersonal dynamics of the team. For instance, in number 1, there is some compelling friction set up between Cass and Steph and Babs that seems to get resolved way too quickly. Dad starts out in number 1 worrying about their identities and Cass/Steph disobeying her, only to completely throw those concerns in the garbage once she realizes they have Tudor, Seer, the Saints, and a serial killer to deal with. I think it would have been so satisfying to see the team overcome that kind of interpersonal friction while dealing with and eventually triumphing over multiple threats. That being said, the interpersonal stuff we did see between Steph, Cass, and Babs is what I've looked forward to most while reading, and I thought it was some of the strongest stuff this run has had to offer. her. Steph's arc was also written well, and I hope we will see character setup and development like that in the future. And I do want to keep reading. I'm very curious to know what is going on with Seer, what Mr. Dhaliwal might know, and if our creepy neighbor is actually a serial killer. So kudos to Clunan and Conrad for having enough open questions to keep me hooked. Overall, I think I had a better experience binging these 6 issues instead of reading them month to month, though binging tends to be my preference. Which brings me to a question I have for you. In your experience, have you found that some comic series are better when they are binged instead of read month to month, and others vice versa? I'd love to hear your thoughts. I don't read enough comics to have an opinion myself. All the best, and apologies for the betrayal. Well, temporarily former BFF. That is a good point, and that's probably something that I should do. I think when you are reading things on the micro, right? You're like so into it that you do almost lose the bigger picture of the macro. And so reading those 6 and having it all come together and knowing what the starting point and end point is, I think there is probably a better appreciation. And that's sometimes the issue with this podcast, is that I am so in the details of everything that I forget to bring myself out. And well, sometimes, like I did, though, with Birds of Prey, that I am looking at the nitty gritty, but then I backed out and I said, oh, well, what did we learn? We really didn't learn much. So I at least try to do it sometimes. There are some series that it is good to binge because everything works really well together in that way. And also month to month, you can forget what happens. That's a constant criticism that I have with DC Comics in general, because they do not have the previous as Marvel does. Marvel will have like a previous, this kind of stuff happens so I can refresh my memory, but DC has never done that. One comic that comes to mind that is really good binging, or at least like a consistent read. Well, actually, there are 2. One of them coming to Amazon, which I'm very excited about. Paper Girls is one of those. And Morning Glories, also by Image, is really intriguing. And that's because there's a lot of there's like time travel. It's really complicated stuff. And so going month by month, and then there had been gaps sometimes during arcs, like that's really hard to keep track of what's going on. And with Paper Girls also, there's lots of time travel. So if you forget, and I think there was also a hiatus at one point, so if you're forgetting what's going on, it's really hard. So I did an episode on Pop Culture Affidavit with Tom about Paper Girls and reread the whole series. And I loved the series already, but I loved it even more sitting there and reading that in a large chunk. So I totally agree with you. I'm trying to think of, where's the reverse true? I'm not sure. Maybe some of Terry Moore's stuff is good, but I like to read his as collections, so I don't even know if that necessarily counts. But I'm just thinking like Rachel Rising, reading all of that and then having, a space of years, right? And then all of a sudden he comes out with 5 years, which connects like all of his stories. And then waiting a bit, and now he's got Serial starring Zoe, who was in Rachel Rising. Like that kind of stuff really works, but still you've got those chunks. But to have a story and then take some space and work on something else and come back, I think that's pretty cool. But a lot of it is, I think, about the memory game. I don't know if there's any, trying to think if there's any like Batgirl stuff that worked well serially more so than as a gap. I mean, honestly, in recent memory, I think some of the Batgirl stuff had to work serially because I couldn't take binging it. So there's that. But yeah, that is pretty interesting. But it is, delayed gratification. I think, it's really sad. Just like, I was talking about NCIS Hawaii. I'm done with it now. It took me, I guess, a week to do those 22 episodes. And I'm super excited, watching this ship happen. And then once it's over, it's over. And, now I have to wait for the fall for when it starts back up again. So there is that kind of sadness too. But at least, we only have, or you, since you read 1 through 6, you only had a month to go until you had 7. But that is something that I should do, just like you did, read 1 through 6, ignoring all the purple boxes and seeing how I appreciate that more. Thank you, everyone, for writing in or commenting on YouTube. Twitter's also come my way, as well as posting on the website. But yeah, so it's been fun to have dialogues via YouTube and all of this. And can always write in, remember, at Batgirl the Oracle. Okay, well, when I come back, I'm going to cover some modern quickies, including some DC Pride talk. A character reappears after years of not seeing her. And I think there's a little something going on in a Tim Drake tale. But of course, we also have a full review of Batgirl's 7. Remember, Nightwing just won't come out in time by when I need to leave for Germany. So I'll just do 2 Nightwings, but alas. But first, we're going to have Zeiss's Radio Hour. And I will say that I was trying to think of some good songs that have queer representation. And I feel like my go-to queer band, though I don't really, that's not the reason why I'm listening to them, is Tegan and Sarah, which you'll hear at the beginning of this episode. But I was trying to think of, what else could I do? And I have it on good authority. This is not even what I'm going to showcase, but I have it on good authority that if you go up to someone, as probably has to be a woman, and say, "Do you listen to Girl in Red?" That is an encoded talk and an encoded message that is asking you if you are gay. Now, I have some questions in regards to this, because what if you literally don't listen to Girl in Red, but you are gay? I don't know how that necessarily works. So I could have used Girl in Red, but I only know 2 of her songs, and I've already used one for the shipper, Make You Mine. So I decided to go with another one. And I don't know that there are any queer people in this band, but the music video is really good and it features a queer couple. So Zaius's Radio Hour this time is featuring Empire by Of Monsters and Men. See you soon.